Beneath the waves lies a world more alien than space itself, where creatures glow in the dark, sounds come from nowhere, and mysteries defy all explanation. Scientists diving into these depths have uncovered things no one was prepared to see, from eerie underwater structures to life forms that rewrite what we know about evolution. These aren't fairy tales, they're real deep-sea discoveries that will leave you amazed and just a little terrified.
The giant leptocephalus. First, I'll talk about something that could be coming to get you if you're not all that fortunate. The giant leptocephalus was a special kind of eel that was first detailed back in 1959. Why am I specifically calling this one out and making it into an eel? Well, that would be because, according to estimates, it's the biggest eel that you would have ever seen, and it's one that dwarfs even some of the biggest ocean creatures in the world. That can be said because one was allegedly discovered near South Africa, and it was said to be 21 meters long. That's quite the big eel, and if it can get to be that long, well, that would be a scary thing to encounter in the deep. Thankfully, and somewhat obviously, there is some dispute about that, as details about the eel are still scarce. Though we do know of large things that dwell in the deep, so anything's possible. Adam's Bridge. If you go to India, specifically go to the coastline where Sri Lanka can be found offshore, you'll inevitably wind up looking at Adam's Bridge. The reason that this is so interesting is that it's a limestone shelf of massive size that actually connects the two nations together. That alone makes it worthy of discussion. However, the debate that continues to rage about the bridge is whether it was made naturally or if it was made by man. The bridge is so special it's actually mentioned in key Hindu religious texts, which makes it a kind of religious icon of the area. On the scientific side, many have tried to determine how old it is and if it was made by nature, along with how it had formed so perfectly to connect two different areas together. If you need some more insight into how insanely big the bridge is, when the Indian Space Research Organization decided to make a map of the bridge to help get some insight, they found that it was actually 29 kilometers long. To be clear, this is not a bridge you can simply go and walk across, as it is mostly underwater. However, that obviously wasn't the case before, as water levels have risen over the years, submerging the bridge below the ocean's waves. Even still, it remains a key part of India and Sri Lanka, and many still wish to understand its origins and whether others like it are still out there in the world.
Hot Tub of Despair. This place resides in the Gulf of Mexico, but you're not gonna find too many people wanting to get into it themselves, as the despair you feel if you do go in is that of realizing that you're about to die. This is a real place, and it's actually not too far from New Orleans by boat. The so-called jacuzzi measures about 30 meters in circumference, reaches about 4 meters deep, and lies nearly 1,000 meters below the surface, so you don't have to worry about just wandering into it on a light swim. What makes the water so bad is the fact that the salt content in it is 5 times greater than the basic seawater that's in the Gulf of Mexico itself. What makes it not mix is so dense that the natural waters cannot actually mix with it. That creates what many refer to as a cauldron of chemicals, and those chemicals are bad for anyone or anything that tries to get in. For context, just a few of the chemicals you'll find are methane gas and hydrogen sulfide, which can kill plenty of things, including people. Now again, people aren't likely to wander into the place, but photos of the area have shown that crabs and other underwater life have accidentally gone into this so-called hot tub, and they never made it back out, showing just how quickly that death can happen. As for how such an area was even made or constructed, that was because the Gulf of Mexico was once more shallow, and that led to evaporation and salt content being left behind in large amounts. Over time, the water and the pressure led to this brine being created. It is nature at work, both for better and for worse. Great White Shark Mystery. Here's one that is both shocking, scary, and may make you glad that you don't go into shark-infested waters all that often. This story begins with scientists who wanted to see the movements and patterns of about a 3-meter-long great white shark. They tagged it and monitored it for some time until, about 4 months later, the black box that they put in the shark to track it ended up on a beach in Australia. After looking at the data, they realized, rather shockingly, that the shark wasn't only killed, it was actually eaten. Something had killed that shark that they were tracking. The next obvious question was, who could have done that? Great white sharks are meant to be the top of the food chain, not the least of which is because of their size and power. However, after looking at the area that the shark likely died in, the answer they came to was that it was eaten by an even bigger great white shark. That's right, sharks are actually cannibals. Who knew? Actually, everyone did, as there have been certain species of shark previously documented that do go cannibal when they feel the need, and that includes the infamous Megalodon from the ancient past. Scientists did note that the scuffle could have happened because the smaller shark attacked the bigger one, or the bigger shark could have just gotten hungry, seen the smaller one, and went, I could eat that.
Julia Sound. When you think about the ocean itself, one sensation you may not honestly think about all that often is sound. I mean, after all, when you're in the water, there is an eerie kind of silence that is all around you due to the water covering your ears and the pressure, and only certain sounds are going to be reaching in. We know that animals like whales can emit sounds that reach far and wide underwater, but other creatures, well, not so much. That's why it's such a shocking thing that on March 1st, 1999, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recorded a sound that was unlike anything they had ever heard before. Equally as important, it wasn't simply a sound or even a loud noise. It was a sound that was so booming it could be heard across the entire hydrophone array that had been set up in the Pacific Ocean, which is thousands of kilometers wide. Another thing to know here is that the sound was not brief. It actually lasted for around 3 minutes. As you can imagine, all sorts of people popped out of the woodwork to provide their theories about what the sound really was. Some of them went into truly monstrous territory, including stating that it was proof of Cthulhu, which we should all be grateful was debunked, as we don't need such a god in our world. The official answer to what the Julia sound was is that the sound emanated from a large iceberg that went to ground near or on Antarctica. And if you think about it, given the mass that most icebergs have and the time it would take for it to stop moving, that lines up with the unusual sound and how long it lasted. Then again, nobody can exactly say where the sound had come from due to its wide echo, and so people are still studying the event to this day. Gulf of Mexico shipwrecks. On the surface, you might not think that there's much to freak out about when it comes to shipwrecks. I mean, after all, since basically the first days of sailing, there have been all manner of shipwrecks that have been caused by various factors. Sometimes the boats are not built up to snuff, or they get caught up in intense storms and sink, or they go and hit an iceberg because clearly that boat is unsinkable. Regardless, you'll find shipwrecks all over the world. But when it comes to the Gulf of Mexico, you may be surprised by how many shipwrecks are there and how many people are trying to learn more about them. For example, an expedition that took place in 2018 noted that there are likely 4,000 ships lost in the Gulf of Mexico, ranging from your basic ship of the past to warships and even modern vessels of today. They even note that they can be found in rather shallow waters or in the deepest parts of the Gulf. And that's what makes it so alluring for organizations like NOOA to go and dive around in the various parts of the Gulf and try to locate as many vessels as they can. Over 600 shipwrecks and possible shipwrecks have been discovered in the northern Gulf of Mexico alone, mostly through sonar surveys in water depths of over 2,000 meters. Just as important, many of these vessels were of the historical variety, meaning that they had been there for hundreds of years. Just some of the craft that have been discovered there include some privateer ships from the early 1800s and even some U-boats from World War II. Furthermore, there's speculation that some Spanish treasure ships are still in the Gulf of Mexico, just waiting to be found, with much of their riches still on board.
Lake Michigan, Stonehenge. In 2023, a deep dive into Lake Michigan revealed a kind of prehistoric structure that had many people thinking about Stonehenge. As you can tell by the rocks themselves and how they're positioned, the comparison is very well made. Divers noted that some of the stones appear to have carvings or markings, which could suggest a cultural or ceremonial purpose. Additionally, the arrangement of the stones seemed too deliberate to be a natural formation, sparking debates among archaeologists and historians. Some researchers even speculated that the site might have been used for astronomical observations, similar to other ancient structures around the world. The discovery has also reignited interest in exploring other submerged areas of the Great Lakes for potential hidden relics of the past. The age of these stones was estimated to be about 9,000 years old, which would actually make it a formation older than Stonehenge by a couple of millennia. It obviously raises questions about who made it, why they made it, and how things changed to where the lake went from dry enough to make the structure to being fully submerged. Aegean ruins. Remember earlier when I talked about how there were lost cities found beneath the waves? Greece is a place where such findings have been made, and considering its relationship with the water, that should not be too much of a surprise. The Aegean ruins are the remnants of certain lost cities that were consumed by the sea over the course of history, and some prominent ancient cities were lost due to this. One of them is the city of Karain. A more popular one is the city of Pavlopetri, which is over 5,000 years old and remains in the water to this day after an earthquake apparently sunk it. Pavlopetri sits off the coast of Laconia in southern Greece, near the town of Elos, and it's believed to be about 5,000 years old, one of the oldest submerged cities in the world and an invaluable archaeological site that offers insight into ancient urban planning and life during the Bronze Age. It was discovered in 1967 by Nicholas Fleming, a marine archaeologist from the University of Southampton, and was later mapped and studied by archaeologists in 1968. It lies just about 3 to 4 meters below the surface, making it accessible for underwater research and exploration, and it covers an area of about 9,000 square meters. It includes streets, courtyards, buildings, tombs, and pottery, all preserved under the sea. Ruins like these and others that have been found in the area point to possibly even more cities being discovered around Greece, but only time will tell if that's true. The Baltic Sea anomaly. After that last one, it seems fair that we now talk about something a bit more mysterious and a lot less bloodthirsty. So I'll discuss one of the greatest mysteries of the deep, the Baltic Sea anomaly. This begins when Swedish divers from the Ocean X team were doing some treasure hunting. That's when they went into a certain part of the Baltic Sea and found a formation that they couldn't immediately identify. When you look at pictures of the anomaly, you can see why they were hesitant to label it as something natural or man-made. After all, it was clearly at the bottom of the water, and it had to get there somehow. But the way that it was shaped made it look like it was crafted by human hands. It also should be noted that there were some accounts that electronics would shut off as they tried to scan the anomaly. And whether that actually happened or not is up for debate. It does sound kind of cool though. The best guesses here are that it is either a unique glacial deposit, which is truly one of a kind, or it's some kind of volcanic rock that was left there long ago. And yes, it does look like the Millennium Falcon. And you are not the first one to think that. The Milky Seas effect. When you're out on the ocean, you may expect to see light from the vessel that you're on, potential lighthouses or other man-made areas that you're near, or from the skies above. However, for many centuries, captains have stated that they occasionally come across stretches of sea that were kilometers long that had light emanating from below. One can only imagine how that must have looked to them all the way back then, especially given the superstitions of those times. Fast forward to now, and the Milky Seas effect is something that we're still studying and trying to unravel. If you know your ocean lore, then you know that certain parts of the ocean could light up via bioluminescence, and it's because of microorganisms that reside in the water that cause it. However, as scientists fairly know, those are much smaller sections of water, so it wouldn't be the same effect as those that sailors and others today have seen. Some would posit that it's because of certain perfect conditions that lead to the water lighting up the way it does. Nobody simply knows yet. But if you do spot a Milky Sea, don't panic, nothing's coming to get you. It's just a natural phenomenon that happens on its own. The Gulf of Khambat ruins. The Gulf of Khambat is off the west coast of India, and during a dig, archaeologists claim to have found ruins of a lost city. Now, that alone would not be all that shocking or even weird, as we have found numerous underwater cities over the years in a variety of places. However, what made this one so special is that there were not only tools located in the Gulf, but what appeared to be remnants of city-like structures.
One piece of wood that came from one of the alleged structures was carbon dated to be about 9,500 years old. Now, if that is fully proven, it would make it the oldest city ever recorded in the world. The team who made this finding did this dig in 2001 to get more artifacts, and they brought back quite a bit. Aside from this piece of wood, amongst the artifacts recovered were pottery shards, weathered stones initially described as hand tools, fossilized bones, and a tooth. Now, that would seem to imply that there was a civilization of some kind in this place. However, not everyone agrees with that statement. First, carbon dating hasn't always been the most reliable way of finding the age of something. Secondly, the method that was used to get many of these artifacts, dredging, wasn't the proper or most efficient way of both getting the artifacts and preserving the area around them. Contamination is something that can skew results either way. It becomes a curious piece of history that could change how we look at ancient civilizations. But until we find more proof of the age, it's gonna be contested. Cuban underwater city. Here we have another case of a formation being found in an unsuspecting area and people not knowing what to make of it. In this case, this was found off the coast of Cuba. It was discovered in 2001 and shocked scientists as the formation, which did appear to be city-like in nature, was about 600 feet below the surface. What made it even more intriguing were the geometric shapes and patterns that seemed to resemble roads, buildings, and even pyramids, sparking theories of a lost civilization. Some researchers speculated that it could be remnants of an ancient culture, possibly predating known civilizations, while others linked it to the mythical Atlantis. Advanced sonar imaging added fuel to the fire, revealing structures that seemed too precise to be natural formations. However, skeptics pointed out that underwater currents and geological activity could easily create such patterns over time. That would imply that it was part of the mainland at one point, and that something had caused it to sink. The head-scratching began when two very different sides offered two very different opinions about what had made the formation. Naturally, some thought that it was simply natural, while others thought that it was man-made. No consensus was ever reached on the subject, and it's not likely going to change anytime soon.
Now it's time for today's topic. In August 2025, residents along the cliffs of Cornwall, England, gathered in disbelief as an enormous fin emerged from the stormy waters below. Witnesses reported the structure slicing through the waves like a black tower, steady, deliberate, and far larger than any known marine species. Coast Guard officials initially assumed it was debris from a capsized vessel, but drone footage captured a slow, rhythmic movement beneath the surface, confirming it was alive. The fin alone was estimated to stand over 20 feet high, suggesting a creature potentially exceeding 100 feet in length. Experts from the Marine Institute in Plymouth later compared the sonar readings to that of a blue whale, but admitted the density readings were unlike anything biological. The phenomenon lasted just under an hour before the fin submerged and vanished into open water. To this day, no scientific explanation has accounted for what surfaced off those cliffs that morning.
The Octopus Garden. The Octopus Garden mystery was caused by the congregation of about 20,000 octopuses that were found near a geothermal vent. But it goes much deeper than that. This garden was in the midnight zone, and the specific species of octopus were doing something really odd. Not only did they form a garden by having themselves all in one place, they actually wrapped themselves around their eggs in such a way that the parent octopuses were upside down. As you can imagine, scientists were baffled by this event. To be clear, octopuses have congregated in the past to lay eggs and mate, but never like this and never in this kind of place and never to such numbers. So then, what exactly was going on here? After some research, scientists believe that the mother octopuses were using the vents, which provide both warmth and nutrients, to try and speed up the hatching of their eggs. After all, eggs in the ocean are often victims of many predators, as Finding Nemo showed us. Scientists note that the longer an egg takes to hatch, the less likely it is to survive. And the mothers seem to have picked up on that and are using an underwater hack to try and speed things up. As to how they figured all of this out, well, that's another mystery to solve on a later day. The Antikythera mechanism. Now, we have the Antikythera mechanism, which was found on a Greek shipwreck, and it truly shook the world upon its discovery because this was an analog computer that was made by the Greeks between 150 to 100 BC, so well before the concept of a computer was truly ever conceived. Yet, if you did the right things, you could tell various dates that sailors might need to know, or you could calculate the next time an eclipse was going to happen in the sky. What's even more astonishing is the complexity of its gears, with over 30 interlocking bronze components that demonstrate an advanced understanding of mathematics and engineering. Some researchers believe it was used to track the movements of celestial bodies, essentially making it a portable planetarium. The craftsmanship suggests that the Greeks had access to knowledge and tools far beyond what was previously thought possible for their time. It also raises a question of whether similar devices existed but were lost to history, leaving the Antikythera mechanism as a rare surviving example. The question and the mystery is, how did the Greeks come up with this thing? Not to mention, how did they build this in that time period and then get it to work so accurately? Nothing else of this nature has been recorded in history for a long time after the mechanism was made. And that really says something. Well, that's about all from the realm of the ocean and the rather freaky and weird things that have been discovered inside of it over the years.
The ancient city of Dwarka. You're beginning to understand how many ancient cities are currently submerged, right? This time we're heading back to India, where many have been searching for the ancient city of Dwarka for quite some time. It's not simply one that sank beneath the waves. It was one that was a key religious city for India's ancient peoples and the key city of pilgrimage. Some accounts suggest that Dwarka was built by Lord Krishna himself, as described in Hindu scriptures, adding a layer of mythological significance to the search. Divers have reportedly uncovered stone structures, pottery, and even anchors that could date back to the time the city was said to exist. Advanced sonar technology has also revealed grid-like patterns on the seabed, which could indicate the remnants of streets and buildings. These findings have fueled speculation that the city might have been a thriving port before it was swallowed by the sea. The city was said to have been on the Arabian Sea and was sunk when one of the nation's kingdoms had fallen. Obviously, people have gone and dove into the Arabian Sea to attempt to find things like artifacts from the city or possibly even the city's foundational walls. However, all discoveries haven't been conclusive. But that doesn't mean the search has ended, though, as many indeed want to find the key city for themselves. The Yonaguni Monument. Long before Cuba had its debate, Japan had arguably the most famous of all via the Yonaguni Monument. This was found by divers upon accident and later dated to be about 10,000 years old. And as you guessed, that's when the debate begins. When you look at the monument, it looks like something that somebody actually built, and there were people in Japan around the time that this could have been made. Some researchers have pointed out the presence of what appear to be steps, terraces, and even pathways carved into the structure, which strongly suggests human intervention. Others have noted that the angles and straight edges of the monument are unusually precise, making it difficult to attribute entirely to natural processes. There are also claims of tool marks on the stone, which, if verified, could provide definitive evidence of human craftsmanship. However, skeptics argue that underwater erosion and tectonic activity could have naturally shaped the structure into its current form. There are even construction clues that highlight how it was man-made versus being a natural formation. Scientists on the other side of the debate would point out that certain things that point to it being a natural formation are there. You know how it ends, though. As the debate continues, we thankfully don't have to talk about this kind of thing again. Which of these deep-sea tales fascinated you the most? And which ones truly gave you the chills? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to check out all the other amazing content popping up on your screen, and I'll catch you next video.